Thanks, Corinne. So just to say, I teach at Marine Park First School in Whitley Bay. Obviously, we're a first school, so my experience is from nursery up to year 4. So I don't have any year 5, 6 examples, but hopefully when we get to talk and share, then other people can chip in with that. These are things that have come really out of COVID and the challenges that COVID has presented us with. Like everybody else, started off in September. There's myself as the RE lead and my colleague wanting to implement the new curriculum, but obviously not being able to visit churches, to get out there and do all the things that we wanted to do. So I currently teach in year 1, and I kind of got the ball rolling in terms of we had children at home self-isolating. We're a large first school, so 3 form entry. So we had this real challenge to begin with. So what I've done is I've just taken examples from each year group of some linked to Christianity of some of the things that we did. But I think it's important to say that we are very much going to continue these things next year. So although they came out of the COVID situation, there's some really great things that have happened that have set us up links, which I'll talk about, that we've made with various people in the community, which means that we can then use that again next year. Because as a school, I'm sure it's very similar to your environments, we're trying to roll out a new curriculum across all subject areas, and obviously every lead is very keen to get out there and do visits and do lots of things. So you know, it's not possible, is it, to always to have the children out of the classroom all of the time. So the things that we've set up are going to be really great for next year when we can do them again. So what we've done in our school is very much, it's been about engaging all staff. I've worked in my school for a long time, so I know my colleagues really well. But how it started was, it was my class, year 1. We wanted to look at what we could learn about Christianity by visiting a church. So we set the children, some children at home, some children in school, a task where basically using cardboard boxes, junk modeling, can you build a church? What does a church look like to you? And what vocabulary did the children already know, which is a huge driver in my school. I'm sure it is in your environment too. So we had lots and lots of photographs coming in, children making churches, putting on the vocabulary with post-it notes. We had children in school making churches in groups, and it worked absolutely brilliant. We had one class where the children became so enthusiastic. They even started to make little gravestones with their names on. We had to draw the line when they started to write death from COVID 2020. No, let's not even go there. But they really got into it. And then they used it in the continuous provision. So we had children using the church that they'd made, adding figures, role playing what would happen in the church. So then we thought, well, where do we go from there? We need to really visit a church. I find that a lot of the work that I've done looking online to get virtual tours and things, there are things, but not really tailored towards really young children. We found a couple of things that we use. So I approached one of our classroom assistants who attends church and asked if she would do a question and answer session. She said, well, I can do better than that. I can actually get the reverend of the church, the father, to actually do a virtual tour. So she went off and did that, which was absolutely fantastic for us. She came back with little videos, and he took the children around the church. It was St. John's Baptist Church in Wallsend, you know, not local to us, so not a church we would have been able to visit. But he took the children around, lots and lots of vocabulary, lots of discussion. And from that, really just their interests grew. So we started to investigate different kinds of churches, and does it always look like a traditional church? Lots of children went off, and when they were out on their daily walk with their parents, went around the local area, had a look at some of the churches. So that was absolutely fantastic. One class, they then took it off in a different route, and they wanted to then focus on, well, why is there a vicar in some churches, a reverend, a father? They looked at what type of clothing was worn. So that all, kind of sparked an interest there. And then we had a member of staff who works in the office who approached me to kind of say, well, would you like to find out about my church? It's very, very different. So she did a question and answer session. So the children sent her questions. She came into the classroom, obviously all socially distanced, all that sort of thing, and talked about her church. And we found out that that was a very, very different, more informal. The space was used for lots of different things. There's a cafe there. So all of that really sparked an interest too. Going back to St John's Church in Wallsend, Father Tim, who actually did the virtual tour for us, the children then got into making a card for him and a thank you letter. So we got lots of cross-curricular links with that. And he then wrote back to us, which they were obviously delighted to receive. And he then invited the children, because he obviously had sessions which were available online. So he invited the children to do some prayers for the church. So obviously we got permission from the parents, and we did the evening prayer for the church. So children just worked in little groups, learning really simple little prayers. And then they recorded them. Now, obviously, next year we may not do it for the church, but they really enjoyed recording the simple prayers. They enjoyed sharing them with parents, and were really proud. And then they put together a service which was bespoke to our school. So they took photos of the local area, there was music added to it, and then the children's prayers were on there. So it was just a kind of culmination of all of that work. Linked to that, just really, really simple idea. Again, we worked in groups where we just gave the children large pieces of sugar paper and just used it as an assessment tool, and said, okay, this is what the church looks like, but what does it look like inside? And they drew things on the large sugar paper, and then we just kept revisiting it. So just used it as an assessment tool. What do we now know? What can we add on to there? Again, through the continuous provision, they got really excited about having a go, making a font, making pews, adding people, really making it kind of come alive. So we record evidence in giant floor books, just basically like big scrapbooks. So the children don't have individual books. Everything just goes into the floor book as evidence. We use QR codes to link up to the virtual tours. We put vocabulary in there. We put people responses in, just recorded as the children talk onto post-it notes. But we're finding it a really valuable tool because you can revisit. So I hold it up at the start of the lesson. Let's look what we did last time. What does this mean? Let's pick out this bit of vocabulary. Can you remember when we did? And it just builds up over time. It's been a really useful tool for me as an RE lead. If you have we have discussions with governors, so you're able to take the floor books, lay them out on the table, show everybody what we've done. And also the children can look back through them a bit, I suppose, like if you're in early years and you have the learning journeys, they like to look back through and see what they've done. So then I guess, again, going back to the staff within your school, things just really expanded, because we found that people were really, really pleased to be involved. That there was a bit of a buzz around school where staff were kind of saying, oh, have you spoken to this person? Have you spoken to that person? So from that, things expanded into other year groups, because members of staff started to say, well, the minister from my church would be prepared to talk to the children. So Year two, it was around sort of Christmas time, and they were looking at how and why light is important at Christmas time. So there is a church in Gosforth, Trinity Church on the High Street. They did a Zoom call with the minister, and he said, well, I'll be prepared to provide some materials for the children to make Christingles. So a couple of days later, all the tangerines, all of the things arrived in school, and the children made Christingles. And again, they did a question and answer session with him. Which was fantastic, free resources for us. A further link was made. I'm sure you're aware that a website called ReQuest, which we've used quite a lot. Some of our year four staff went onto that website and were trying to kind of access some resources. Some things they found were there, some things they found weren't there. So they actually emailed the site, and it turns out that one of the guys who works on that site is local and is from Whitley Bay. So he then provided links just for our school and was really, really happy to help us with planning. I think particularly, so the year fours, when they were looking at what do we know about the Bible and why is it important to Christians, they found that some of their subject knowledge was lacking a little bit, and they found it a bit difficult. So he provided some really fantastic links. And they've got that sort of going back and forth where he is, more than happy for them to email back and forth. We had an already outstanding link with the local Baptist church, and they usually come in and do assemblies with the children, very much sort of role play type things. And so we were able to speak to them and sort of say, this is what we're doing in school now. This is what we're going to be doing after Christmas. They did some work around Christmas time where they role played the Christmas story, which was then sent into school, and everybody could watch that. As an RE lead, I've been really conscious of the fact that when you look at what early years have done and what they do in year one, linked to the Christmas story and linked to the Easter story, you find that the children have a really good knowledge when they leave, and they do basically know what the Christmas story is, what the story of Easter is. And we felt as a school that there was a lot of repetition. We were going over the same sorts of things when the children already really had that knowledge. So we've tried very much to make each year group have something very, very different, so that there's that progression. We talk a lot about sticky knowledge and building that up over time. So again, a link through a member of staff. Her parents are both majors in the Salvation Army, and they were more than happy to come in. And that's probably one of the favourite activities I think that we've done so far from my point of view. They literally came in with a set of Christmas cards. So we were looking at why were gifts given at Christmas time, and they started with just a Christmas card with baby Jesus on the front, and obviously got across to the children that is, for a Christian, the most important gift. That is the gift that was given at Christmas time, but then managed to draw down through a Christmas card with a lamb on, for instance, that obviously the lamb was brought to baby Jesus. That in itself could bring food, could bring milk. It was just a really nice way of doing it, and really, really simple. And I think, collecting Christmas cards is a really, really easy thing to do. And all of the discussion came around those Christmas cards. And it was just literally holding up the card to the children and getting them to suggest what they felt the gift was. And actually they were really, really good. And by the end of it, so obviously there was the wise men, and by the end of it, we told the Christmas story, but it was very, very different to how we possibly would have done it in the past, where we might have been just, retelling the story, recording the story, making little story booklets. It was far more relevant and far more creative and exciting for the children. And then again, we had a question and answer session. They talked about their uniform. They talked very much about the support that they give to the local community. So at Christmas time, which I'm sure a lot of you do anyway, we have a food bank appeal, and they were able to talk about where that food would be going, how they would be helping homeless people, people who had drug addictions, all of that sort of thing. So we collected toiletries, we collected food, and although it was going to a different destination, I think the children made that link really well. And I'm sure it's quite easy to link up in some way, shape or form with the Salvation Army in whatever community that you're in, and I'm sure they'd be more than welcome and happy to come in. So that's definitely something that I'd like to invite them back next year, continue with that sort of session with the Christmas cards. I think it worked really well. So in year 3, they were obviously also doing the food bank appeal as part of the whole school session, sorry. But they were looking specifically at Advent. So again, we went back to St. John's Church, and Father Tim, who's actually retired, his daughter is now the Reverend there, and she was kind of, I'm a little bit jealous. I think that was a really great session that my dad did. I'd really like to get involved. What can I do? So she sent some very, very short bespoke videos about Advent, did a lot of work around preparation. So staff brought in purple pieces of material, just as a kind of stimulus for a discussion, and then use these videos on a weekly basis that she'd sent to kind of talk about the Advent, the candles, the Advent ring, all of that sort of thing. And then as a class, they decided to then do a reverse Advent calendar. So a lot of them at home got themselves a basket and popped items in each day, which they then took themselves to a local food bank. And as a class, they collected items as well. So that linked in really, really nicely. So again, kind of going back to your flow book evidence, you've just got all of these pictures in there, links to the videos. It's really nice to show visitors. It's nice for the children to look back at what they've done. When we came to Easter time, again, it was very much okay, the story of Easter, and how can we do it in slightly different ways in different year groups. So year 2 looked at how Christians celebrate Easter. In their class, there is a parent and a child, well, a parent who's from Greece. And so she found out about this and contacted school and said, well, actually, we celebrate Easter at a slightly different time to you. We follow the Eastern Orthodox Easter celebrations. So we would be really happy to share what we do as a family. So that class were able to then go down that route, which I think was nice. Again, they were talking about elements of the Easter story, but they made that comparison between celebrations in Greece, and Mum was able just to drip feed videos, photos, sent in samples of food for the children to have. And it was just a different way of tackling it, and just made it a real experience for the child in the class, but also a real experience for the other children, and just to see something slightly different. And again, there was links with geography in terms of locating Greece, all sorts of different links. And I gather it's this weekend around the 2nd of May that they will be celebrating Easter. So that's kind of gone on over time. So I'm thinking what else I've got. I think what we've tried to take also is probably that early years notion, where you try to draw on the experiences of the children. one member of staff said she felt as if we were really modernising our RE curriculum and making it very, very relevant. We've bought some books for school, and I was talking to Krenz about this a while ago. It's a really gorgeous book. It's called He is Risen, and it's by Patty Rokas. You might have come across it before. And it's, if you Google on YouTube, she actually does videos. So it's basically pebbles, smooth stones, which she's collected, and each page just retells the Easter story. So we just had a whole bunch of pebbles and stones that we put out on the table. We had the pictures from the book out, and the children just began by copying the images. We watched some of the YouTube videos. There's really, really nice music which goes along with the book, and then they just began to create their own. So it was a nice way of dealing with, let's face it, which is a tricky story to talk about with young children, I think. And again, I think if at all possible, where you can make links with a minister or a vicar, where you can talk to them about the age of your children. And the videos that were sent to us from St. John's were very, very sensitive, very short, couple of minutes long. We watched one each week, told the story, but in a really nice way. So I'd really recommend that book. Apparently there's also a Christmas version, which is really, really nice. And I think you could use it in any year, really. I mean, we again used it in Key Stage 1 because we do have continuous provision which goes throughout the year. So the children were able, in big tough trays, to recreate the pictures. But they were really taken by that. The other thing that we've tried to do is use lots and lots of artifacts, use pieces of artwork. So we use the artwork of the Last Supper, and just really having it out on the table and getting the children to talk about what they noticed. Who do you think this is? What's happening? And we just revisited it over the Easter period, and kept coming back to it and picking out different things, talking about small elements of the Passover and why they were there and why it was the Last Supper. And then they did a lot of work around role playing that, but obviously in a respectful, sensitive way, in terms of, well, when it was my birthday party, I had my friends around the table, and this is who I chose to invite. And so very much letting the children lead, but obviously keeping it within the respectful confines of the curriculum. As a school, which I'm sure you all have too, we have our values which we've devised, and one of them is respect. So we talk about a lot about respect in our RE curriculum, and we revisit that during every inquiry-based question, and it's something that we talk about a lot. Oh yes, I've got one. Again, I apologise, it's really sincere. I've got a lot of Key Stage 1 ideas and kind of lower Key Stage 2 ideas. But when we looked at what Christians believe about God, we did a lot of work with puppets and animals, and had eagles and lions, and talked about the symbolism within the Bible, and the eagle symbolizing God as a protector, and putting out their wings to protect their people. And we did the creation story, again very much around role play and making our resources. So at the time I had a trainee, and she used wooden spoons, which was an idea we just picked up from Pinterest, really, where we illustrated each day, and the children did. So again, it linked to maths. They did some work on ordinal numbers. They had to order what was happening on each day using the spoons. They had globes and atlases out, again links to geography, where they were talking about the world. We used tough trays to recreate what was happening on the days, and they used the animals, they added people, they made the day and the night. And I think really it's again, as an RE lead, it's what I'm sort of saying to my colleagues in other year groups. We can do a lot by looking at what happens in, hi Arthur, I can spot a familiar friendly face. So we've done a lot around looking at, I suppose, how things might happen in early years, and kind of saying to staff, you know, further up the school, the children in year 4 like to do really creative things, and just and explore things through play in the same way as the children in early years do. And I think it's probably, we have a bit more of a confidence to say, yes, I'll do that lower down the school, and when it gets higher up the school, it's a bit more formal and a bit more, I suppose, sometimes can get less creative in the way that you record things. So that's what we are trying to do, make each session, let's have a really nice stimulus for each lesson. We got, this is the only thing I had in my bag actually, year 4 were given again by somebody who found out, these little bags, just little Lent bags, and they've just got little objects in, and each of the objects, so you know, there's a little tea light in there, there's sweets in there, there's a star in there, and it just came with a really nice pack just to kind of symbolize different things. So the star is symbolizing when the cross, about before Jesus was arrested, and the rock, there's a rock in there which was when he was out, Jesus was in the wilderness. So they just used that bag, and they just had all of those various objects in there, and it was just a really nice discussion point. There's a fish in there linked to when the feeding of the 5,000. So we're just trying to each time think, what is our stimulus going to be? What we're going to bring in? Is it going to be a piece of artwork? Is it going to be a story? And the only other thing I was going to say was that we've found just a trawl. We've joined the resource centre to utilize all of the resources there, but even just to trawl through Amazon, that's how I came across He Is Risen. Just to have a little look and see, there's some really exciting modern books out there that you can use with the children. And again, just that notion of maybe kind of modernizing things and making it really, really relevant to them. But I'll be quiet now and stop babbling on, and maybe I'd love to hear some of your ideas too. And you know, when we're allowed, we have an open door policy. You're more than welcome if you're local, or if you want to, come across to the school, if you want to do some collaborative planning, if you want to see our flow books. By no means we're saying that, it's the finished project and they are the answer to everything, but there's a real enthusiasm and buzz around school, and we've kind of got started with things, and it's like just being a snowball effect, really. Once one thing's happened, something else has come out of that. So, I'd be happy to work with anyone if you want to do some idea sharing or some planning. It would be really great, because I guess we're all just trying to increase our subject knowledge and make it as best we can for the children. Thank you.
Ah, fabulous, Elizabeth. Thank you for that whirlwind tour of what's been going on. I've got like about 10 different things going around my head with things I could extend and do with the stuff that you're doing. And I'm really grateful for everything that you've shared. Can I ask a couple of questions before we kick over to everybody else to do sharing or other questions? I'll ask one and then I'll be quiet and then someone else can come in. My one question would be, is there anything you would have done differently in all the reflection that you've just done? Is there anything you think, I'll do that differently next time, and why? Just because I'm interested.
Well, I think, I think for me, and as a school, actually, it's assessment that we really need to embed, and we need to do differently next year, because we are trying to devise appropriate assessment tasks, but we still don't feel as if that is fully embedded. Um, we're really keen to access some of, I know some training is on its way in terms of assessment. um, I think that's probably, it's a tricky one to answer, because I think there probably would be members of staff who would say, well, that wasn't as great as it could have been. Like I said about year 4, they found their first question around, I've got my stuff here, around what do we know about the Bible and why it's important to Christians. They found it quite difficult to plan. So I haven't really answered your question very well, but I guess there will be, but I think it's probably quite a personal thing depending on what each member of staff would say.
Yeah, and I guess it would also depend on the actual class they have in front of them that year. We all know that
Yeah.
classrooms are moving feasts, and depending on who's in the room at the time, it can be very different.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. Thank you. That's really useful. That's lovely. Did anyone want to share similar approaches or any questions? Because this is the chance to open up the space a little bit. And I know you might be a bit shy with all these pictures off, but it would be good to hear somebody else rather than just me inquisitively querying what's going on. I'll just let Libby in again. Anyone want to ask anything or share anything that they've been doing?
Hiya, Corenza.
Go on, Jem.
Hiya. So just the reason why Sam and I are here is because we have a nurture provision in our secondary school where we have some really vulnerable students who need an intense amount of support, don't they?
Yeah.
And the secondary curriculum, I suppose it's the same for every subject. It moves on regardless of whether our students are able to meet the benchmarks that are set for them. And whilst I suppose mainstream students do really well, we think we can take some ideas from the things that you guys do in primary really well and use those and adapt them, especially for assessment. So we were just really interested in how you actually present your assessments and what sort of skills you're expecting your young people to be able to show, to see if we can sort of emulate in some way and make our young people, especially the vulnerable ones, be able to feel like they're a little bit more successful. So if anyone has any ideas that they would be willing to share, that would be really grateful, especially coming out of COVID, because we're worried about our year 7s massively when they come in September, because they're going to have had 2 really important years completely disrupted. And it's how do we support those students, all of them, I suppose, isn't it? Not just the most vulnerable ones. But so if anybody has anything, we'd be really grateful.
Assessment's always a tough one. And we can really come back to that a bit later. And obviously, Elizabeth, there's certain things you have been assessing, but I mentioned a book in the chat earlier, which is designed for secondaries. It's Dawn Cox and Louise Hutton, their book on the 6 principles behind the teaching of RE. And their approach to assessment is really interesting. And it's definitely around the marking isn't going to work. There's lots of things that you need to bear in mind when you look at assessment, including how you build the activity first. And you mentioned some really interesting words, Elizabeth. I don't know where you got them from, but sticky knowledge, that's a massively big thing right now in the RE community. Are you, and just in general, are you building in sticky knowledge, stuff that they need to know, that without that they can't build on the next stage? So some of the assessment for individual progression and individual learning is about what is the key concept or key sticky learning you want them to have? When are you revisiting it? Have they built it in, and can you move on without it? So doesn't answer your question, Gemma, but I would recommend, did I send you a copy of that book, Gem?
Yeah, I spoke to Simon, I think it was, via email at the resource centre. So I just basically need some time to get up to Durham. And
yeah, okay, because there's a chapter on that in it, but the whole thing builds in relation to the principles that Elizabeth already mentioned. Are you building your key vocabulary? because there's no point in revisiting stuff later if they don't know the words that you're using and how you're using them and why you're using them.
So we still say that to our year 11s, and even our sixth form students. You can't access a question at GCSE if you don't know what a word or the topic of that question is. So it's definitely something that we place a lot of emphasis on. It's just presenting it in a way, isn't it, that's accessible. Yeah.
Libby, have you got anything to say about assessment at this stage, or anything else that's been going on?
I just absolutely love everything that Elizabeth's been saying about practical things that that run through and build on what you're using, like the idea of the models and the artwork and things that revisit. In terms of assessment, we use a system of something called endpoints. So, and I'm from a large academy which crosses 6 campuses at the minute, and so we have to be quite coordinated, a little bit corporate, quite coordinated, but it seems to be working because we use these endpoints as part of all of our foundation subjects as well. Is where you want each set of children to be, what exactly it's the vocabulary that you want them to know, not too much and not onerous, but that's part of your teaching, so that you have those conversations with children about vocabulary in RE, what experiences you want them to have. So like the visits or visitors, the workshop ideas, the storytelling, the drama, the art, all of those kinds of experiences of learning that you want them to have, as well as the knowledge. So it's a combination of several different things that kind of builds the whole child. And I suppose our way of assessing now is we mark where those children are against those endpoints. We love highlighters, don't we, when it comes to assessment? So, not only highlighting your national curriculum document, but you can sort of sit down and at the end of sort of half a term or after a few weeks of teaching something, you can just quite easily pick out the things that you've covered, but also where the children need a bit more of a chat, they need a bit more dialogue, they need a bit more experience of something. So I would say that assessment, not going down the tick box thing at all, but more what do you want as the whole RE learner to look like by the end of each of the years, or the phases or the stages, which is all a bit muddled at the minute, isn't it? Because they're not going to be at the end of where they need to be for a few years, possibly, because they have missed some out. So I don't know if that helps.
It certainly fits in with the basis of the syllabus that North Tyneside teachers are following, Libby, and that it's follow the learner.
Yeah.
So follow the learner on their journey. Are you equipping them to move through the year groups?
Yeah, because the curriculum is progressive. And we were talking about this recently about concepts, the fact that the children keep revisiting concepts. So if we're having that filling the gaps element, that you can be pre-teaching things, actually, because the concepts are the same, you are broadening their understanding and giving them some depth every stage you get to anyway, so that there's not an issue that you are totally introducing totally new things every time, which you kind of have to start from the ground upwards again. You're actually building, and so our endpoints, our assessment endpoints, fit in with that really well. And if you've got a handle on the whole of your curriculum, then you can see that threaded through, and you can revisit that with the children, especially with the older children that can pick that up because they've been doing it for a while.
I'm really aware that we have some skit people in the room with us, and so it might be quite an intimidating conversation to share, but Libby is an incredibly experienced RE coordinator across multiple schools, as she said, and has been it for a long time, so that's someone who you can really learn from. I was just wondering, before we bring Robin, because I think he wants to say something, if Jen, would you just talk about your knowledge organisers and how they work in terms of your assessment as well, because I know you're hot on those.
My school love them. So they use them for history and geography and science. So once I sort of created, like, I'm sure what everybody else has done, like a kind of long-term plan, scheme of work type thing using the new curriculum. And then sort of gradually over the year, what I've been doing is creating knowledge maps or knowledge organisers, whatever your school calls them, for each of the, the different sort of termly focuses for each year group. So, for example, in sort of I'm teaching Hinduism in year 3 at the moment. So I've created like a Hinduism knowledge map, which goes over, it sort of contains all the sticky knowledge, all the key vocab, and then sort of other key bits of information that I want the year 3s to specifically know about. And then we are also then in year 4, they also do Hinduism. So the year 4 is it's like their knowledge map is very much progressive. So it builds on the vocabulary and the sticky knowledge, and then sort of what their core sort of focus is. So I think they're working really well. They're still a sort of work in progress. I haven't done summer 2s yet. I'm sort of using ones that I've found on the internet, and like Twinkle have got a few, but I'm pulling it all together and sort of very much making them bespoke to our like the key questions that each year group are having to use. But all the staff in all the year groups have got access to them, so the staff can, sorry, my kids are being noisy, I really apologize. The staff have got access to look back at what the other year groups knowledge organisers are, so they can kind of see, hopefully, obviously they're quite new, but in the future they'll be able to look back and see what the year groups have experienced on that.
It would be really good as well, wouldn't it, for some of the secondaries? I mean, I know Gemma's in the room, but some of the secondaries to see some of these things as well, because I think they underestimate entirely the actual depth of what the primary experience can be for a lot of children. And don't worry about your kids making a noise.
Sorry.
No, don't worry about it. I've got a dog going, and I'm sure Rob's cat's shouting somewhere in the back. So just carry on.
That's why I'm on mute and the video's off. Boys, please.
They can come and say hello, we don't mind. Data protection. Boys, cover your faces. Elizabeth, do you want to come back in? I mean, one of the sad things about the whole lockdown experience was that we were just all about getting together on our North Tyneside network to say, can we have a meeting to share some of these knowledge organisers and see what was going on, weren't we? And then that all just kind of collapsed. So I do think there will be some space when we can get together in the real to do some work on that and share them. Just wave them in. We can say hello. Hello, boys. Your mum's trying to work.
They're going.
Bless them. So that's something else that we could be looking at, and anyone's interested in that, then do flag that up for us.
I'd be quite keen on sort of getting together with people, because I think it was, and I think when we had that initial meeting, didn't we, when we first looked at the new curriculum, I think it was what a few people were talking about, because I'm sure we're not the only school that's really hot on using them, and it was one of the first things that like my senior management wanted. They were like, can you make sure you've got knowledge organisers, and we've also, what we did during lockdown, and for any children that we've got who are isolating, their parents get sent the knowledge maps. So it's just a really kind of quick, easy way to kind of be like, look, this is what your child should be covering. So even if you can't necessarily access like the lesson content, they can talk through the vocabulary, they can talk through, the kind of sticky knowledge. But yeah, I mean, I'm nowhere saying that ours are perfect and that I've got everything, because it's quite scary being the one that's creating all of them. And it's, like, I don't know a lot about all of the religions. I've never taught all of them. So, I think they're very much a work in progress.
I've been doing my job 27 years, Jen, and I am floored at least once a week by something that I didn't know that I didn't know. So please do not feel that anyone could be an expert in anything, because you cannot. Elizabeth, do you want to come back to any of that so far? Jen, thank you for that. That was awesome.
No, just to say, that I'd be very much up for that, Jen. It'd be great to think if we could get together as a group and, share ideas. And we don't actually use them, but we have talked about it. We just have all of that, I guess, probably all that information in our medium-term planning, and then we're just working on what the format of the short-term planning looks like. But that sounds really interesting, and I think it's good to share, because there's obviously a lot of work gone in a lot of schools. It has been a bit of an opportunity, the COVID time, let's face it, to get to grips with planning across a lot of subjects, probably time that we never would have had before. We were kind of saying as a school, we're not really sure how we would have launched some of our new curriculum ideas had we not had some sustained period of time where staff could work on it, because it's just so busy day to day, isn't it? And it's very easy to kind of say, oh, I did that lesson last year and I'll just grab it and I can do it again. Whereas this has been a chance to kind of look and say a real refresh and how can we make things much better. So yeah, and it's what we've tried to do in our school is a bit more of that. We do a lot of collaborative planning, but try to kind of focus on different subjects at different times and get people together. And as an RE leader, I've tried to just get together a group of really enthusiastic people who are keen to kind of share and just spend some time with each year group and kind of chew the fat and say, right, this is a new, again, like Jen said, a lot of the content we've never taught before, and so we're just kind of getting together and saying, how can it look? Let's map out the next 7 weeks. What is it do we want to include? And that works really well, doesn't it, when we work collaboratively.
You've said a few things, Elizabeth, that I know Beth is working on as well. So Beth, can I bring you in and just, because you've got some stuff on knowledge organisers and your church tour and stuff now, or I've got a question about that for you, Elizabeth, as well in a minute.
Hi, yeah, so I've been trying to get a virtual tour of a church, and that's something like we're working on at the minute. I know you gave me the email address for Monks Eaton St Mary's Church, so I'm going to do that and see, because I think my schools really miss being able to kind of explore church. I've used, in reception, we used the Playmobil Church from the Resource Centre, which the children really loved, and it was nice to explore. And yeah, I've used a lot of the resources at the Resource Centre. That's been really good and helping. So yeah, I'm looking forward to try and do a tour, and maybe if we can video it, that's something we can share around.
Is there any tips that you might have, Elizabeth, for Beth on stuff you thought, well, I wish they'd done that a bit differently, or I wish I'd thought about that before I asked them to do it?
Well, I can. Well, first of all, Beth, I could share. I'm sure that Heather, who works at my school, would be happy. She actually videoed it. So I guess we could have been a bit more specific in our requirements in terms of what age group it was for, and because it was the first thing that we did really, and they just kind of did 3 videos where they just went round the church. The guy who did it for us was actually in his 80s, and he was brilliant. Obviously very, very knowledgeable, had been a vicar for many, many years, and so he was really pleased to be asked. But I suppose if we'd given him a kind of some of the specifics of where we wanted to go, because he literally just led the children round on his videos as he saw fit. Obviously started at the altar and went to the various areas. And then sort of he used quite a lot of vocabulary that we had to then go through and kind of think, well, I've never heard of that before. What does that mean? And that sort of thing. So I guess if you're making that link, it's just really being very specific about the age of the children and how long you want it to be and what you want them to talk about. But no, other than that, it was good. I found one online, an Anglican church, which literally was from the outside and went inside and toured all around. That was really nice and really, really useful. And that had a cafe and all sorts of everything in it, so the children were really, really keen.
I just put a little note in the chat just to remind people to remember to tell the children that that churches are not normally empty in terms of their function. There was a brilliant project at Durham Cathedral where they did a book of poetry called Tom Something Says the Wall Smells of Cherries, and it was just a book of poems that children themselves had done all in around the worship place. So they'd been stilled, allowed to go to wherever they wanted to go, exposed and given time to explore that little bit of the church. And then they wrote basically census poems and responses to the church. And what they saw in the first tranche of those is the kids thought the cathedral was always empty. They had no idea because they were never seeing it full. So it's that bit about what does this place of worship look like when it's functioning with people in it, comparing that to a classroom at break time and a classroom in lesson time. I think it's really quite important. Or they always think they're ghost ships. Beth, anything else?
Just with the knowledge organisers, so we do a knowledge organiser for every subject, and the class teacher does it, so all the year group teachers do it. So I think that's just because then they're really familiar with what they're teaching and like kind of know. I mean, I'm in reception at the minute, so I wouldn't be able to kind of make one year 6, so we do it that kind of way. So, and then obviously I'll see them when I look at the books in book scrutiny and stuff like that, and it's really nice, like some of the different ones. So I'll be happy to share our knowledge organisers and compare with others. It'd be quite nice to do.
One of the really interesting things, going back to assessment, that's in Dawn and Louise's book, and I don't know how you do this in terms of your marking, but I do think you're doing it naturally, Elizabeth, in your big books, is that they're talking about, and it's only one approach, but they do talk about how, you know, the red pen and green pen and the corrections thing might be, it's all very well, because it does show kids what they have and haven't done or what they haven't learned, but it doesn't do anything in helping them embed the new knowledge. It doesn't help them do anything to reframe what they didn't know in the first place. So that idea of having something that you then get them to reframe and then reframe around a different question, or as you're doing, Elizabeth, you build the knowledge in a way that's quite accessible, then you revisit it and you revisit it. That's much more likely to establish better learning. And they do talk in their book about marking as well. The book cites lots and lots of different bits of research, and you can see them on the footnotes, but it does make quite a mind-opening comment on marking not being an effective way to help children learn. And it's how you restructure the exercises and how you revisit the content, how you reframe the knowledge, and how you get them to reframe the knowledge. So I do recommend that book. It's actually written for secondaries, but when I interviewed them a little while ago, we did a conversation on mine. In fact, there might even be a film of the conversation somewhere that I can send if you're interested. I can send it to you, where they talk through the 6 principles. But I do think that book is good for anybody who's interested in learning, and it's certainly good for anybody who wants to embed RE, those principles through RE, just as a matter of interest. I don't get any profit from the book, by the way. There's no shares. I was just really impressed with it when I read it. So anybody else want to come in with any questions or comments or anything? It'd be lovely to hear from you. Because if not, Rob will do talking about North Tyneside things, which is lovely, be fine. Any of the students in the room have any comments on what they've done or learned, or anything they would want to ask about? Because sometimes we differentiate between experienced teachers and student teachers, but in effect, any of us, as Jen said earlier, can be flawed by coming across something we don't know about. You know, what we don't know, doesn't matter how much experience we've got. So please do feel free to ask questions if you'd like to. Okay, so I had a question for you, Elizabeth, if no one else comes up. And that was about the broader sharing of the films, because one of the things that you've done is very successfully look at the diversity of Christianity. So when people are teaching Christianity, and I know Libby will nod at this, they quite often just do the tradition that's their school or the tradition that's close to them, but they don't look across the way about the links and the diversity. But Salvation Army, Orthodox, Anglican, that's awesome. Did you do that on purpose, or was it just an accident?
No, it was just an accident. Like I said, it just happened because there was a bit of a buzz around school with people kind of talking about, oh, have you heard that Heather's going to talk to year 1? And then people just started coming forward. So it involved staff from our office, teaching assistants, teachers, out of school club. And actually we've moved on to Buddhism, and we've got a teacher who's a practicing Buddhist. So a similar sort of thing is rolled out she goes to the Compassion Centre in Gosforth. So we are doing a Q&A with the monk from there. So you know, it's just kind of become a commonplace thing. It was just really people approaching me and saying, would you like me to? My parents are in the Salvation Army, and other people kind of saying, oh, did you know that such and such goes to this church? And you're right, it would have been great. We would have gone over the road. We've got a church over the road from the school. We've got links with that church, but actually we wouldn't have, well, it's cost, isn't it, for schools in terms of you know, bus and risk assessments and all of that sort of thing. And yeah, great, we'd love to go down the road and visit the church in Wallsend, but realistically we wouldn't have done that. And so now we've got that link, and we were able to make that comparison. And yes, we want to get into a real church, which we will do, but then we've got those things that we can now draw on. And I'm sure that in your schools there'll be lots of staff who'd be really keen to share. And actually, I think particularly for our finance officer, she was really pleased to have been asked and delighted to come and talk to the children. And then she just kept, you know, coming back and forth and saying, I've got this, I can do this, I've spoken to the minister. She took some bits of work that the children had done to show our choir, and, you know, links it just happened. It just, you know, snowballed.
That's lovely.
Great. And it takes the pressure. I mean, I think going back slightly to the floor books, we've used them for about 3 years now. We use them for history, geography, science, RE, and I personally really like them. I think it's a far better use of my time to record the learning, to make it a working document, to be scribing responses from children, than actually to be sitting with 30 books, you know, after school and going through with my green and pink marker, because I do that for English and for maths. And you think once you've done 60 books in a day, that's pretty much it. You want to spend that time planning creative lessons, making resources. You don't want to always be, and luckily we've got a senior leadership team who are really on board with that. They've seen the quality of the work in the floor books, and they're happy that the evidence in there is reflecting the learning that's taken place in my classroom. And I'd really wouldn't like it if we had to go back to each child having an individual book. I mean, there's always individual pieces of work, individual responses, personal reflections, but it's just, and it's kept over time. So we refer to the one from last year when, you know, so it's very visual, and it works.
That's great. Perhaps we'll get you to bring a couple of them along to the next network meeting when we have it in person,
Yeah,
Elizabeth. That'd be really good.
because it's not easy to convince. We kind of started with just dipping our toe in the water with science, and then really it just,
I think it's like anything, isn't it? Different strokes for different folks. And if it works in your school, that's brilliant. But it doesn't mean we can't, even in another school where it wouldn't necessarily fit, it doesn't mean we can't learn from what you're doing and that building up of knowledge over time.
yeah.
That's really good. I know that Sarah and Kat bravely have their cameras on. So I just want to make sure that, do either of you want to come in and make a comment or something? I don't want you to feel, yeah, please do, Sarah.
It was just really about the floor books. So we've started using them this year. I came back from maternity leave, and then I took over RE, and it was an idea that I'd seen. And it was very much, I taught in Key Stage 1 before I went on maternity. I'm now in Key Stage 2. And I felt like sometimes it was just for the sake of getting something in the RE book, and like you say, they were marking something, and it was taking time away from the quality discussion and jotting those things down. I just wanted to ask, do you use those floor books across the whole school? Does everybody use them? And yeah. Yeah, okay. I've managed to convince them for Key Stage 1, but haven't yet moved it away for Key Stage 2. So, because it was very much like, you know, well, they should have the opportunity to write a longer piece or reflection. So in terms of in Key Stage 2, do you still stick quite a lot of, if they've done like a little bit of a reflection or a bit of writing or something, do you just stick the best, like, of some of them in, and what do you do with the rest of them?
Yeah, I know what you mean about that. Well, what we've started to do is, you're right, we stick a sample in the floor book. Depending on what it is, then if it's an assessment class, we've been keeping it at the moment. But others, certainly lower down in the school, we let the children take them away, or they're displayed on the wall, or so not everything goes in. That they're not sort of huge. It's just like a giant scrapbook, really. That fills up really kind of quickly. It's just, I suppose, about getting the range of responses and not having the same children in there all. But I know your school well. My children both attended Coates.
You know, when I saw your name, I thought it must be Max's mum.
And actually, funny enough, so Max is doing his GCSEs at the moment, and
Frightening.
yeah, and doing RE, and I've really realised how much that builds up over time. So when I've been advising with him, going through things, it's, you know, it's so important. I think that it's taught really well throughout primary, because by the time they get to GCSE, they are revisiting a lot of the concepts that we're teaching. I have to stop myself from saying, I've just taught that in year one, you should know it, Max. Yeah, it is really progressive, isn't it? I think it's important that we really raise the profile. But Rachel Blackburn, who teaches at our school, is friends with Kate. I don't know her second name now, I just know her.
Bonner.
So so you know, either one of us, and I'm just down the road, if I could pop in and show you all, because I know you're a bit further away. So I'm just down in Ponteland, so if you want to do any sharing or have a look at it, and I can pop into school on the way home.
That's brilliant, thank you, thanks.
That's a really good connection made, as long as poor Max, whoever he is, doesn't go down the road with a big rucksack of stuff on his back, he'll be fine. Kat, would you like to come in with your question?
Yeah, it was just another question about the floor books. I was just wondering, do they follow the children up through the years so they can revisit and recall the knowledge from previous learning?
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's a good question, because actually that is something that we haven't previously done. We've just kept it, but that is what Stephen is really keen to do, because he made that point the other day that it's all in there and it really should go to the next class teacher. You're absolutely right, so that, you know, they can see, well, this is what you've already done. And I suppose in our quest to kind of, when we do Easter, when we do Christmas, to make it very different and very progressive, it kind of helps with that, doesn't it, in terms of, well, we know that they know that. Because I was just looking at our early years flow book yesterday, and then you think, wow, they've done an awful lot already, you know, when these children come to year one. But in terms of our medium term planning, we do put an annotation at the top just to see what's gone previously. I suppose it's like Jen was saying with the organisers, so that you know exactly what's been taught previously when you look at your medium term planning. But in short, yes, we are going to look at doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd find it fascinating as well, getting the drug out from the previous year. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's also really good, I think, for the knowledge storage for the school community itself, because quite often you RE specialists, or those who get landed with RE, you can do so much work and it all gets invested in you because you're the one that does it. I mean, heaven forbid, Libby, if you ever vanish from your school, and when you go, it's quite a vacuum of what they've been doing and how they've been doing it, and it doesn't necessarily reveal the depth of what they've done. So these books are a massive store. Libby, what do you think?
Yes, I mean, we were talking about refreshing and re-engaging. I've just sort of had a quick review with a lot of my staff about how things went with during the COVID times. And one of the things that came up was not knowing how well the children had engaged. We could send things out through the different platforms. And, you know, there's a certain amount of communication you have with families, but it's really about refreshing and re-engaging. And I just lifted my evidence book up. We call them evidence books. I lifted my evidence book up with my year ones today and just went through the pages of things, and they were, wow, we've done all of that. So that's amazing. I mean, they love looking at themselves, don't they? And using that to show, because especially the younger ones, they don't get the fact that they're going on a learning journey. And so for them to be able to put that into perspective, and, you know, you can pick things out, remind them of some of the things that they've been doing in order to be able to move on the understanding that they've got now. And I just love this thing of, you know, don't put it in books all of the time, because you spend more time worrying, how can I get this piece of learning in a book, than how can I make this learning amazing? And I think we have to be, excuse me, I'm kneeling down. We have to be so courageous to be able to do that when you've got other people looking in on you going, but prove it, you know? So those experiences you have with the children, get them down in all sorts of different ways, even the older ones. I mean, I put in the comments, you know, we had a time when we could say to the older children, right, here's you can have a pack of post-it notes. I want 5 or 6 older children, whatever we're talking about, you write down what they just said. Here's the question. You write down what they just said. You write down what they just said, because you can't sit and do it all. And actually, it's a really good skill for them to have. And they have to listen and they have to understand. So if you share that scribing job out amongst a few of the children in Key Stage 2, that's another way of them, you know, engaging and embedding what they're learning, because they're listening to other people and they're also writing it down. But I also find teaching the older children, they just love it when they put the books away and they have to get up and do some drama, or they have to hold up things in order according to who believes in what, and, you know, which is the most important thing here and which is the least important thing here. Because active learning is a really big thing as well, getting them up off their seats and making sure they're really engaging.
It is interesting, isn't it, that we kind of look at kids and go, oh, they get so disengaged in Key Stage 2, and then by Key Stage 3 and 4, and actually we don't think, well, why are they disengaging?
Yeah.
It's because what we're doing isn't very engaging. Something you said that's really important, though, is, and it's that high challenge, low threat. Mary Myatt and all her work is about high challenge, low threat. So even if, I mean, she does this fantastic thing about, do the children understand the etymology of the words? So do you understand how the word Christmas is broken down and why it's called Christmas? Because if you understand that, then it gives you an insight into what is going on behind the festival. And someone kind of said to her, famously, one of her stories is, someone said to me once, well, that's really difficult for children who are 4. And she said, you tell me a child who can't tell me 3 dinosaur names. So, you know, they get these words, they know how they work, they're not stupid. It's up to us to give really high challenge and really low threat. And I think if we can keep doing that, and what we've seen from Elizabeth is on the ball, absolutely on the ball. We are running out of time. So I do want to give Rob just a few minutes to wind it up as a North Tyneside thing. Elizabeth and everybody else who's contributed and comments, I will download the chat. I will make the recording available. It's a bit raw, but I'll make it available so you can share it amongst yourselves if there are ideas that you missed or colleagues that you want to send it to. I will assume that unless you tell me now in the chat that you don't want it, I will send it out to everybody on the list. Is that okay? And I'll download the chat too, because there were lots of bits in there that I think people might want to have. So I'll make all of those available. Anything anyone wants to say before I hand over to Rob, apart from show of hands, applause for Elizabeth and her bravery and her ideas and awesome stepping up, Elizabeth. And if any of you want to do something, Jen, maybe something on knowledge organisers later, or, you know, Sarah on something you're doing, Kat, very, very welcome, because I think some of the best learning comes from our peers. They, you know, I can give advice all I like, but I'm not day in, day out as all of you are. So I really want to make sure that we learn from each other. You are the best resource your children have. You are their school. You're awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. Right, Rob, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Carenza. I'm just, you know, when you're always thinking of something pertinent and relevant to say, what I would say is, I started reception in 1970. And I've had nearly over 50 years of being on the receiving end and being in the delivery end. The last 30 plus years has been on the delivery end. And I've been in this role for coming up to 20 years. And I have to say, I'm PE, you know, I'm PE and other things. But what I've seen tonight is the best case of sharing, the best case of working together, the best case of collaboration in all that time. And you mentioned snowballs, Elizabeth. Well, you're a snowflake and we're all snowflakes, and snowflakes make snowballs and snowballs make snow people and snow people make avalanches. And it's just that whole process by which working together, we are all working in different schools. We all need to be bespoke. We all need to support our own individual children. And that was one of the things which Ofsted will look at. So we have that in one sense, but we all want to do the best for our children, which is the real key driver for what we do. And the more we share, the more we support and the more we are open about what we do and not worry about the scrutiny, the better it will be for everybody and will make the profession so much better. So we all come from different stances and different angles. I'm sitting here as the least knowledgeable person about RE in the room, but I have been so engaged, so enthralled and captivated by what you've got to say. So again, I'm jotting things down. RE Virtual Resource Bank, Carenza, we've got to get that pulled together for all of our faith settings, but not to forget we need to get out to our faith settings. But yes, online provision. They're coming together in the next academic year. That's what we're planning. That's what we're looking at. You know, we'll use the facilities. We might have to run more than one session if we still got some social distancing or people are uncomfortable. Maybe smaller groups will look at that. Assessment and planning, yes, I know. I think sharing planning first, then looking at assessment, because if we've all got, again, the same goal, but we've got different routes for getting there. So I'm mindful of that, because some people will have to incorporate their existing school planning. The visits is a must. It's always a must, because I think getting out there first-hand experience is key to everything we do. And again, with regards to that, if you're stuck with a risk assessment, give me a shout. I can definitely help you with that. The knowledge, the organisation, the sharing, the sticky knowledge, the reframing, all of those types of language, I think they're pertinent across a whole range of subject areas, but how we share them and how we cascade that out and we support and bring other people on this journey is absolutely critical. I look back to a few years ago where RE network sessions, if we were lucky, had the number of people you have as fingers on one hand. What we see now is so much better, and we'll all learn so much more. So hats off to everybody. Elizabeth, amazing. Thank you so much. Hopefully you are leading the way. Everybody else out there, have that little bit of courage, because nobody's going to judge you. We're just going to be grateful for what you have to say and what you have to share. So for tonight, for everybody, thank you for giving me a fantastic hour and a quarter. I've learned so much. And thank you for giving me more mileage to work with Carenza to try and do more for you. And remember, what you want, what you would like, please share with us, and we will do our utmost to facilitate it. So that's part and parcel of the role we have here. So a massive, massive thank you to everybody.
He just loves to give me work. You're all awesome. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Look after yourselves, look after each other. Skip people, I'll see you at some point with your training. I think I'm going to be talking to you. Everybody else, you're adorable. Keep safe, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.